One of my favorite, and sometimes the least favorite parts about the Yu-Gi-Oh trading card game are the ever-changing formats. Unlike other TCGs, with no set rotation, the card pool allowed in competitive play for Yu-Gi-Oh has grown each and every time a new product filled with shiny cardboard is released. Of course, we have a ban list to keep things in check as much as possible. Sometimes it works better than others. But every now and again, the stars align and we receive a gift from our Konami overlords, a good format with a good ban list and a good card pool and endless fun to be had. But what makes one of these good formats? That is the question that I'm going to try to answer in this video. What is the best Yu-Gi-Oh format? Before I begin, I just have to preface this video with, this is just my opinion. I am not perfect and I am bound to make some statements that you disagree with. So if you agree or disagree with anything I say, please let me know down below in the comments. Without any further ado, I'm the Yu-Gi-Oh Scrub, and let's answer the question of what is the best Yu-Gi-Oh format. While of course this is a subjective question, I do believe there are a few characteristics that are pretty common in most beloved formats by Yu-Gi-Oh players, and those are going to be the characteristics that I focus on for what makes the best format. Very simply put, these two characteristics are 1, a good variety of decks to choose from with no one deck being so dominant that it just ruins the game, and 2, very good, skillful, interactive back and forth gameplay with your opponent. The first characteristic of many deck options is definitely important for a very healthy Yu-Gi-Oh format, and one that I believe is crucial for any format that I'm going to deem the best Yu-Gi-Oh format ever. Let's remember a format that lacked this first trait of many deck options, but did have the second trait of interactive and skillful gameplay, so we can understand why it's a good format, but doesn't meet the standards for best format ever. The best example that I can think of, and credit to you if you thought of it as well, is the Ravine Ruler format from September 2013. If you're unaware, Ravine Rulers was the deck that succeeded the original Dragon Ruler format with the Baby Dragon Rulers and Super Rejuvenation, and was actually a really fun and interactive format. While the deck was incredibly skill-based, with a mirror match of the deck almost always going to the better of the two players, it was really the only deck that was competitively viable. I do want to say before someone comments, yes, there were some sacky cards like Sixth Sense and Return from a Different Dimension, but players would actually often side these out in a mirror match just so they could have the most skillful gameplay. Yes, we did also see some other decks, such as Mermail and Evil Swarm, see some competitive success, but it really was Dragon Rulers and different versions of Ravine Rulers that were the dominant deck. For this reason alone, I just don't think that the September 2013 format can be viewed as the best format to ever exist in Yu-Gi-Oh! But now let's do the opposite and remember a format that had a good amount of deck choices, but the gameplay between the decks just wasn't very interactive and skillful. I will admit, this is a harder scenario to come up with because most of the times when there's a lot of decks to choose from, they do have interactive and skillful gameplay, but I think I came up with a format that kind of is this scenario. I believe that the Teledad format of 2008 and some of the formats that succeeded that format are the best example of many decks being viable, but none of them really being interactive and skillful in their gameplay. Now, I bet some of you are already typing in the comments, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Scrub! Teledad was a tier 0 format, there weren't many deck options. Okay. I get it, yes, Teledad was one of the first tier 0 decks, but to that, I say yes and no. This is because, although there are plenty of different kind of Teledad version decks, each deck was slightly different, and you saw stuff like Light Sworn, Zombies, regular Teledad, and even Glad Beasts, which are not Teledad, but they were thrown in there as well. So there were some deck options, but they all kind of revolved on this sacky Teledad style of gameplay. Of course, with the exception of Glad Beasts that didn't really play that sacky. So besides Gladiator Beasts, almost all of these decks were some sort of version of Teledad and were kinda sacky in their gameplay, and were likely to have at least one OTK in a 3-game match. I don't know about you, but I don't really like a format where I can pass turn with 8,000 life points, and basically expect that if my opponent opens up well, I'm just dead. Although not a perfect analogy, and it may be better to say a die roll format is closer to what we have today, These kinds of formats are similar to what we call a die roll format, where whoever wins the die roll or rock, paper, scissors is almost guaranteed to win the match simply because they got to pick first or second in the beginning. Personally, I just can't look at a die roll format and say that that is the best Yu-Gi-Oh format ever, because you're not playing Yu-Gi-Oh if the winner is almost guaranteed to be whoever wins the die roll or rock, paper, scissors. You're basically just playing rock, paper, scissors. So now that we've remembered some of the formats that just lacked that little special something, let's remember the formats that really had it all. In my opinion, there are 3 formats that I would choose that best represent formats that had both a variety of decks to choose from and all the decks would provide skillful and interactive gameplay with your opponent. The first format you probably could have guessed, this is the April to August 2005 format, also known as GOAT format. Now, I'm kinda cheating with the second one, I'll admit it's technically 2 formats, but I picked the September 2011 to the September 2012 full year. So again, technically 2 formats, 1 ban list in between that happened in March, but they were pretty similar in their formats and still again offered a variety of decks with good gameplay, and I like both of them so much that I combined them into 1 format here. And finally, we have the fall and winter, specifically the fall though, 2014 format, also known as Duelist Alliance format. Now, before I wrap this video up, we have to talk about each of these 3 formats, and I will conclude by ranking the 3 formats, and you'll get to see what I believe the best Yu-Gi-Oh format ever really is. I'll go in order that I introduced them, so to begin, GOAT format. With the pandemic in 2020, GOAT format has actually gained a lot of new competitive players because they're looking for something new, old, I mean, how technically is it new, is it old, whatever, but they're looking for something different to do with their time, and GOAT format was that thing for them. And with many new players entering the competitive scene, we've actually seen a lot of evolving of the old decks that were there and new created decks that people have been coming up with. Many people often regard GOAT format as what Yu-Gi-Oh truly was, the most pure essence of what Yu-Gi-Oh the card game was supposed to be. It is a faster-paced game than Magic or Pokemon at the time, with no summoning sickness and no mana requirements to play cards, but it was also slow enough with interactive gameplay where it really was a grind with your opponent to manage your resources until the end of the game or until you could OTK and just get your opponent's life points to 0. This format offers any player with any playstyle a deck that they will enjoy. Love to OTK your opponent? Play Reasoning Gate Turbo or Rescue Cat. Do you love managing your resources in the control game? Well, try Goat Control or Pac-Man. Or do you like constantly beating your opponent down with big bunguses? Well, you got Chaos, you got Beast Beats, you got Skill Drain Beats, and many, many more. And if you are a scumbag who gets enjoyment from your opponent's misery, then you can play Library FTK, Empty Jar, Stall, Burn, or even Exodia if you really wanted to. Point being, there's a deck for everyone, and with good deck building, you should be able to compete with pretty much any other deck in the format. Onto the 2011 to 2012 format, now we have Synchros. This changed the game, allowing for big boss monsters to come right out of your extra deck, no metamorphosis required. Tengu Plant, or simply Plant Synchro, is often regarded as an incredibly fun and one of the most skillful decks ever in existence, and it was popular in the earlier days of the September 2011 to September 2012 format, kinda got nuked in the March 2012 list. But if you're like me and you can't think past 3 card effects activating at a single time, then maybe a simpler deck is for you. Maybe Chaos Dragons after the March 2012 list. Or if you like cute things and really big normal monsters, maybe Dino Rabbit. Do you want to piss your opponent off, discard their entire hand, or pop their entire board? Well, we got Inzectors and Windups for you. Of course, I'm still missing some decks, but point being, again, there's a deck for everyone. Unlike GOAT format, this format, or again, technically 2 formats, because of the Synchro and Extra deck, it feels more like modern Yu-Gi-Oh! The Extra deck is a toolbox that you can access a little bit easier because you don't need metamorphosis, and monster effects are a lot more a part of the game than they were in GOAT format. And finally, we have the 2014 Duelist Alliance format. In the first set of the Arc V era of Yu-Gi-Oh!, Duelist Alliance gave us 3 competitive monsters right out of the gate with Shadal's, Satellar Knight, and Burning Abyss. two of which still see some competitive play to this day. Sorry, Stellar Knight. At the time of their release, though, these three decks were pretty equal in power level, with some people saying Shaddoll were probably just a little bit above the other two in terms of competitive power. I would argue that this is the first true format of what I would call modern Yu-Gi-Oh! You might be able to argue that we don't quite see the million negate boards that we get nowadays, but this was the set that set the pace in the march towards the shenanigans that we see today. So what is the best format? I told you I'd rank all three, so here we go, but remember, just because these are the top three, none of them are bad by any means. Even though one is third place, it is still a great format. In third place, I'm going to put the Duelist Alliance format in 2014. While there were plenty of rogue decks that you could choose from, and they were kinda competitive, you were a little bit limited to these top three, Stellar Knight, Shaddoll, and Burning Abyss if you wanted to be competitive, at least until Cleefort came out, and then there were 4 decks that you could choose from. Also, Super Poly and Shaddoll kinda gave it a little bit of an advantage just because of the attributes of both Stellar Knight and Burning Abyss, so it kind of ruined that interactivity just a little bit with the other decks. That being said, this format still is great and deserves all the love that it does get, but it has just enough flaws that I'll put it third on my list of top formats in Yu-Gi-Oh! Ever. In second place, to some of your surprise, I'm gonna put GOAT format. GOAT format is continuously evolving, but it's not uncommon in GOAT format to get into a scenario where you're just watching the game drag on and on. It is not that uncommon that you'll end up in a situation staring down a level limit area B, a gravity bind, a skill drain, or some stun card, and you are just sitting there waiting to draw one of your few back row removal cards, and until you draw that, you can't really do anything. Also, while every format has powerful Saki cards, the big 3 spells in GOAT format, Pot of Greed, Graceful Charity, and Delinquent Duo, with Snatch, Steal, and Premature Burial, and Heavy Storm also kind of being up there, these are just really Saki cards, and sometimes the game does just come down to whoever opens up Duo, Graceful, or Pot of Greed. And you could have guessed by now, but in my opinion, the best format, or again, 2 formats that Yu-Gi-Oh! Has ever had is the September 2011 to September 2012 year. There are just so many decks to choose from that fit so many playstyles, whether you like aggro, control, stun, whatever it might be, and the amount of decision trees exceeds that of GOAT format each and every turn, but isn't overwhelming for a newer player to the game. It precedes Lord of the Tachyon Galaxy and Dragon Rulers, and even Mermails and Fire Fist, and I personally believe that this is the perfect power level that decks had ever been at. The decks were strong enough to have fun, good, powerful turn 1 plays, but weren't ending on a million negate boards, so those strong plays weren't unbeatable or created boards that were uncrackable from your opponent. So, that's it. My ranking for the top 3 formats in Yu-Gi-Oh! And why, personally, I believe they're the best. I'm sure many of you might be upset, think that I forgot some formats, think that I may have forgotten some criteria that make a good format, so let me know down in the comments. Like this video, dislike the video, I don't really care. Subscribe for more content just like this. Thank you all for watching. I hope you have a great day. I'm the Yu-Gi-Oh! Scrub, or Bailey, signing off.